Hi, my name is Frisia, and I've entitled this series Abusive Marriage. Since it's not over, I'm not going to show my face. I may never show my face, but this is my beautiful pet rabbit who's very, very elderly, but still hanging in there. And I wanted people to know what an abusive relationship looks like from the very beginning. I also would like to differentiate generalities of being married to a narcissist who turns into a sociopath, which is what happened in my case, from the specifics of how things go down. So I'm going to give examples. I will try to narrate from the very beginning, although there will be some time skipping. So I met him 24 and a half years ago, and I married him about 2 years after I met him, and I was pregnant 6 months later. There was a little bit of love bombing in the beginning, but I have to say that tapered off pretty quick. So I don't know why I stayed, but I think it was the future faking, where he was promising me the stars and saying he was going to be a millionaire and we were going to live in a big, beautiful house. And interestingly, a lot of that came to fruition, but not without quite a bit of pain and sacrifice and trauma on my part. I do have 2 beautiful children, and I've resurrected my career and my life, so I can't say that it was all for naught, but I really wouldn't recommend it to anybody. Okay, Bunny has decided she doesn't want to be filmed at the moment. But anyhow, I have kept a journal since I was about 8 years old, and I have recently begun to read my old journals from the mid-90s when I met my husband, from whom I am not yet divorced, and that will be a whole nother story. But the most interesting thing of all is that I barely mention him at all in the year up to the time that he proposed. Hello, sweet bunny face. I think she wants to go back. Okay, just a moment. We're back. So that is in stark contrast to the very, very brief relationship I had right before I met him with another person who I am now dating again, oddly enough. And when I wrote about that other gentleman, I was really interested in him and I felt emotional about him. I was very eager to talk to him and be with him. The intimacy was great. Everything about it was really kind of heart-pounding. And then he decided he wanted to see somebody else, and I accepted that at the time. There are a lot of factors involved. I don't, obviously I didn't hold it against him. All these years later, we reconnected. But I soon thereafter met who I thought was my dream husband. And I realized, looking back on it, I was close to 30. This was the mid-90s, and I was ready to get married and have kids. So I thought, wow, this is a Cinderella story. The timing is absolutely perfect. This man just dropped out of the sky. A friend of mine introduced him to me. He was her roommate's friend from college. And he love-bombed me in the beginning, brought me huge, expensive bouquets of flowers, took me to really expensive restaurants and concerts, none of which I could afford because I was in training in my field in an expensive city. All right, I'm going to let Bunny have some privacy. So I fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. The fascinating thing all these years later is that he would never talk about any of his previous relationships. He acted very cavalier, wouldn't name names, said he had a girlfriend in high school, and here we were, late 20s, and he never mentioned anybody else besides this woman. So I assumed he was just trying to protect my feelings. and not make me jealous. But in talking it over with friends years later, I realized he might very well have been a virgin. After college, which took him almost 6 years to complete because he was busy founding a fraternity and partying, which he would later say that he had an advanced degree and he was an expert in all sorts of things, none of which was true. After college, he moved in with his parents. So when I met him and started dating him, he had only been out of his family home for about 6 months. And he was living with a very annoying group of people who stomped around, made lots of noise, were inconsiderate. So I was in a rush to settle down for all kinds of reasons and get him out of that place. I wanted to live with him, be with him. Yet, honestly, I never felt that I loved him with any kind of passion. I was attracted to him, and he seemed to do all the right things, and he was good in bed at the beginning. But that's probably because we both had, 20-year-old hormones, and it was not exactly difficult to be compatible with someone in that arena at the time. When it came to having had 2 kids and working and bringing them up and hard feelings between us, it turns out he didn't care about making me happy at all, pleasing me, giving me a good experience. He only cared about himself. Shocking, I know, for a narcissist. But anyhow, I'm just going to tell a few quick stories from the early on. One was literally within the first few weeks we began dating. He went out one night with his roommates, who he had only known a few months, and did not invite me to accompany him, although we had been spending several nights a week together, and only called me after the fact to tell me what a great time he had had playing paintball. And I was very hurt. My feelings were very hurt. I lived about 45 minutes away, and it was a weeknight. However, my training was in kind of a lull, and I would have gone if I had been invited. And when I said, why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you ask me if I wanted to go? He said, I knew you wouldn't like it. And I remember thinking, well, that's strange. I've only known you for 12 weeks or something like that. How on earth would you know that? And then he said, it hurts. You're using these big, heavy balls, and you carry around these big, heavy guns full of paint, and I just didn't think you'd like it, so I didn't tell you about it. So anyhow, I got over that pretty quickly. Fast forward to December, which was probably 8 months in, and up until that time, everything had been absolutely perfect. We traded off nights at each other's homes. We both cooked. We enjoyed each other's friends. We were very compatible, it seemed. And that December, he was invited to a Christmas party of a family friend. And these were local business people in his community who he'd grown up with. I'd never heard of them. I'm from the opposite coast, and I did not know these people. He had never mentioned them before. And he just said something like, the so-and-so's party, Christmas party, is on Thursday at 6:30. Can you come? And I said, sure, I'll drive down. Like I said, this was probably an hour from where I was living and working, and I had no control over my schedule. When things came up, they came up, and I could not leave. We didn't have cell phones back in 1995. Well, something came up, and I was stuck at work. I tried calling him at home, but he had already left for the party, and I showed up an hour late. He was absolutely livid. And I was in shock. I was thinking, what did I do? I mean, I was just a little bit late for this party, which was a big social gathering with probably 50, 60 people. This family spent 2 minutes being introduced to me, but I suppose he was trying to show me off at the time, and this was this big introduction for me to all of his friends, so-called friends. We almost never saw them again, which I think is also fairly typical of people with a personality disorder. Once they start investing in their target, they divest themselves of others in their lives. They don't need them anymore. They concentrate on you. Of course, I knew none of this at the time. So I was really surprised at his reaction. I was angry right back at him. I thought, that is absolutely ridiculous. My career is just as important, and it's very demanding. So I didn't really apologize. I might have said an offhand, well, I'm sorry, you should have told me. If it was so important, I wouldn't have come at all. And he replied with something super obnoxious, such as, well, maybe I shouldn't have invited you. Then, within 3 months, he asked me to marry him. So, in retrospect, the entire thing was pretty absurd. And even between December and March, when he proposed, I was reading through my journal, and his name literally never came up. I wrote all about work, my sisters, my friends. I mean, I would mention in passing that he was at my apartment for this or that, but I really think I was just expecting that we would go down this path. We had talked about how we wanted a family, and we were both getting close to 30. We needed to settle down and so on. His parents love me, and I brought him to my family's home for Christmas, and they had a suitably positive impression of him. And then he proposed. And I said, yes, oh, fabulous. He put a gorgeous multi-carat diamond ring into a single red rose and handed it to me at a picnic in a park on a spectacularly beautiful day. And it was just fairy tale, storybook. I went home, I made call after call after call. Everybody was thrilled for me. Anyway, it was the beginning of the end. But looking back, there were some red flags, as we now know them to be called. And I will tell you more of the story next time. Thank you for listening.